What is up? Welcome back to Drummers on Drumming, a podcast powered by Big Fat Snare Drum. My name is Ben Hilsinger, and we are back with another installment of The Drum Panel. And today I'm hanging out with two drummers I really admire, Dave Elitch and Sarab Singh. So Dave has worked with the Mars Volta, Weezer, the 1975, Justin Timberlake, and plenty more. And alongside his playing career, he's become quite the sought-after instructor on body mechanics and the psychology of performing. He's put out 2 online courses already, one called Getting Out of Your Own Way and the other Staying Out of Your Own Way, and they deep dive into how the body moves behind the kit. But his brand new online course called Your Mind's Ear shifts the focus to sound and gear. Joining us is also my good friend, actually our mutual good friend, Sarab Singh. He's an incredibly talented drummer based in Los Angeles and currently plays with Muna. Beyond that, he's a friend of the pod. He's been on a few times, and he's one of the best hangs I know. So the perfect bridge between me and Dave. And this isn't just a promo. We cover a lot of ground like we always do, but Dave's new course is the glue that holds the conversation together. And you can find out more about all of Dave's courses, but especially his new one, Your Mind's Ear, at daveelitch.com. And like most of the conversations behind the scenes of this podcast, we just start talking and then I decide when to start the episode. So this is when we were talking about the benefits of double bass, kind of the continuation of the conversation me, Gunnar, and Brendan had a few weeks ago about even if you're not a metal drummer, double bass is still something you might want to get into. So I'm going to shut up, but here we go.
I grew up playing so much Pantera, Meshuggah, and Tool and all that stuff. I grew up playing so much metal. I had a double bass pedal forever, and then, I did Kill or Be Killed and my metal band Daughters of Mara. So it's like, I love that music. I listen to that music every day, but like, my double bass is in the toilet because I never use it professionally.
Yeah.
And even like when I do clinics, I have one, but like unless I'm playing along to tracks, I don't use it. I don't even use it when I'm soloing.
I saw it because one of your last clinic pictures, because this is when I was like, should I get one or not? I literally was like, all right, if Dave is rocking it. And so I like looked at your video. I was like, I can't see his feet. But then I saw you posted a clinic picture and you had it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well.
It's there if I want it, if I need it. And if it's not, that's fine too. But you know what this comes down to really is like most people, when I was in high school, I relied on it way too much. And if I didn't have it, I couldn't do anything. And you don't want to be one of those guys where it's a total crutch. And then like if you can't do quads, then you can't do anything.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. And then when I started hanging out with Ronald Bruner and all those guys 15 years ago, like it literally wasn't allowed. It's interesting. Someone asked me, I can't remember who it was, but someone asked me, hey, can you recommend some like double bass like music where it's not heavy? And I was like, no.
Yeah. Where it's like featured, because I think like Carter, when I played it in high school, because Carter at the end of Tripping Billies, would do this kind of cobham, that thing.
Right.
And he would do it with the double kick and the lights would go off. And then of course, Tim Alexander, who I think Ben, Gunnar, and Brendan were talking about, like Jerry was a race car driver.
Yep. That's kind of the only example I can come up with is Tim Alexander. And like some of the Primus stuff is heavy, I guess. I mean, they opened up for Slayer, which is insane.
Wow.
But I wouldn't really consider them heavy. But it's interesting because it's very difficult to use double bass in a way that's musically appropriate when you're not playing heavy music, which is why you need to do it with Muna.
Dude, well, it was for the Greek show, the bass player who's amazing, Gio, he wrote this he's got a jazz background, he's got a metal background, he's like one of those guys. And he wrote this awesome kind of in one of the end of one of their songs, he built like a double bass section.
Sick.
And I was like, what do I do? He's like, just do it with the floor, the floor tom. And I kind of learned it, but it ended up getting axed from the show. But I think it is a cool, like when I saw Doja Cat at Coachella from far, like they would just go into little passages and it was just such a little pop of like, what was that? It was amazing. So, I mean, Vinny and Dave and Steve kind of used it in cool, in like a little passage in a solo, just for a minute. And Akira Jimbo, some older Akira Jimbo stuff, he kind of used it the same way too.
It's been a long time since I've listened to that stuff.
I wish I could say the same, but I listen to him a lot. I love him.
I don't want to minimize what Brendan said because he kind of talked about it for a second, like Sarb was saying. But Dave, question to you. One of the points Brendan made was it helps you be more symmetrical, and he almost uses it more backstage to get ready as opposed to using it as a musical choice. So what are your views on that as a teacher?
That's a great question and a great point. I love Brendan. He's a good buddy of mine. We've done a ton of lessons together over the years on a bunch of stuff. He's just, as you guys know, he's just like a curious guy. So
yes,
he's always asking great questions, and I love Brendan. As far as warming up goes, my whole thing, which, you know, some people may have heard me say before, drummers are athletes. Musicians are athletes. Certainly drummers are athletes. And we need to warm up in the same way athletes warm up. So that's why I'm a big proponent of skipping rope. And many times I'll do hit intervals of 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, 10, 12, 15 sets of that right before I go on stage, throw the rope down, walk on stage. And I don't even have sticks in my hands a lot of the time. Sometimes I do. But the act of rotating the jump rope is plenty to get your hands and your forearms warmed up. It gets your cardiovascular system going, gets your legs warmed up. That's the thing, man. So many people are just doing rudiments on a pad, and then they sit down, and it's like getting hit by a truck. And then you got lobster claws, and then you can't feel things, and like you're in shock, like literally. And so I was actually just texting with Travis Barker because we've been working together, and he's out with Blink, and I like dramatically changed some of his setup and some of his warm-up routines because he's like, I mean, dude, that guy works harder than anybody. It's crazy. He's got such an insane amount of energy, and he was playing the entire Blink set before the show as a warm-up. I was just like, dude, what? Like, I would be dead. So we were experimenting with, like, he's used to doing so much that what I told him to do, it seems like nothing, you know? So we're like finding a Goldilocks zone of like what works for him, because that might not be enough just skipping rope for him, because, you know, everyone's different. But yeah, like the short answer is skipping rope, that does wonders. And people often confuse practicing rudiments on a pad with warming up. And those are not the same things. If you're getting on the field to play rugby or soccer or football, are you going to do something that's complicated for your brain?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. You know, like this is a physical instrument, and certain gigs you're not hitting that hard. You're not really going for it, so you don't need to do that much. Certain gigs you really need to do a lot. It depends on the person. It depends on the musical situation. But if someone's been doing rudiments on a pad for their whole life, sitting there and doing double bass seems kind of radical in comparison as a warm-up. But it's still not the most optimal way to do it compared to skipping rope. And, like, I've taught people for years, and I'm like, did you do it on tour? They're like, no. And then they like finally do it, and they're like, holy shit, I can't believe, A, how hard that was. But B, once I got used to it, I can't believe how much of a difference that made. Because it not only warms up your whole body from your toes to your head, but it warms up your cardiovascular system as well. And it's a lymphatic pump, and it gets your brain in the game.
I was just going to say, there's studies that I've looked up, like jump rope benefits at various times. There was a Monitor guy years ago who on a summer tour got me into it, and I remember looking it up that it improves brain function and memory function.
That's
which
cool.
is, I mean, incredible.
No, it's exactly it, because it gets your mind in the game. And it's like I made the mistake like years ago of like walking into Meshuggah's dressing room like 15 years ago before the show. And I was like, oh, hey. And like it's like record scratching, and everyone turns around, and I'm like slowly backing out of the room, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, before a show, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. Fucking don't talk to me. I'm getting my head in the game. And that to me is one of the most beneficial things about skipping rope is it's what I call detached focus. Because if you're skipping rope and you think about skipping rope, you're going to hit your feet. And if you space out too much, you're going to hit your feet. And it's the same thing with playing an instrument. If you space out too much, you're going to mess up. And if you focus too much, you're going to mess up. So it gets that primed in something that's like, you know, no risk, really. You're just skipping rope by yourself. Who cares if you hit your feet? But it gets that sort of mode engaged, and then you sit down. You're warming up the car. Like, that's really what it is.
It makes all the sense in the world, and is literally, you are the actual, and I know you know this, but you are the only actual person who's ever really even talked about a drum warm up in this way.
Well, thank you. I just am constantly reading and learning and applying stuff, and I'm not touring. I haven't been touring in the past few years anywhere near as much as you guys, but when I do tour, have toured historically, like I'm always trying this stuff. That's the difference. I think a lot of teachers, I should say, don't do that, and it's all hypothetical. They're like, well, this makes sense on paper, and then they never apply it. So it's just purely theoretical, and a lot of times things make sense on paper, and then you apply them, and then they don't work. So it's about taking what works and what's like road tested and going, hey, like I tried this, a bunch of other people tried this, seems to work. Maybe try it.
Well, I'm good at derailing conversations. So before we get into your Mind's Ear, which is your new course, I do want to be true to the drum panel and start off with a question that I enjoy. I'll ask both you guys. I don't think I asked Sarab and Adam last time they were on, but I'll start with Dave. What piece of gear throughout musical history do you want to own the most personally?
I'm a snare freak, as a lot of people know, and I have to kind of cheat and lump in 2 or 3 things kind of as one thing. But like for me, and I talk about this in the course, the first time I like thought about gear really was obsessing over Abe Cunningham's snare drum sounds and Haka with Meshuggah's snare drum sounds and Danny with Tool. And they all ended up being these heavy cast bronze drums. A Tama Bell Brass or a Sonar HLD 590, or hilariously on Digital Bath, apparently it's a 5.5 by 14 Orange County 20 ply vented snare. It's just,
wow.
And that's, you never know, sometimes you're just like, oh, I thought that was a Bell Brass, but like there's so many variables. You're like, oh, that's crazy. It's a vented Orange County. But I love the snare sound on that track. It's just insane. Anyway, so for me, the Sonar HLD 590 and the Tama Bell Brass, which I've owned multiples of those, and then those turned into me making the TrueCast with DW, which is my own homage and version of like tribute to those drums, really. So those 3 drums are pretty incredible. So that would have to be my answer.
Mine, well, Brendan did steal one of mine last week, which was the 4 and more ride cymbal, which is kind of an obvious, but staying with ride cymbals, I was just talking to our buddy Andrew Marshall yesterday about this. The flat ride from Now He Sings, Now He Subs, the Chick Corea record, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys might know, I think maybe that was like was that the first flat ride ever?
I don't know if it was the first flat ride ever, but it was like an 18-inch Paiste 602
and it's
blue
18
label.
inch.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Chick Corea had it, and he gave it to Weckel, and then Weckel brought it to Sabian, and they tried to make like copies of it. So I went in there one day, and they happened to have the cymbal in the office, which was pretty wild.
So wild. Did you play it?
I played it. Of course.
Yeah, and it probably just sounds like that cymbal.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique cymbal. I mean, and that's the fun thing about the gear stuff is like, and like Paistes as a company is, and I've talked to Chamberlain about this a bunch, like Matt, when you play, and I've played his drums a bunch of times, like when you sit down and play those Paistes in the room, you're like, oh my God, this is like an ice pick in my forehead. Like it's so pointed and harsh and bright. And then you go back and listen and you're like, oh, okay. Like they're just sitting above everything, and like I get it. It's not my thing, but I totally understand why people do it.
That cymbal, interestingly enough, too, there's a YouTube video where Chick talks about how he basically gave it to Airtoe, used it on a Return to Forever track or record maybe. Then the next drummer, Barry Altschul, and that like kind of avant-garde group that he had with Chick. And then I remember seeing Chick with Jeff Ballard in the late 90s, and I can't remember what it wasn't like the Electric Band, there's another name for that band, but I remember specifically the flat ride that Jeff had, and it was just, there was so much stick, and it was so perfect, and I remember thinking it sounded like Now He Sings, but I didn't know you could pass a cymbal on. So I know it sounds dumb, but I was like, no, that's his and that's his. But anyway, I love that cymbal dearly, and specifically the way Roy plays it.
Do you remember the first jazz album that really showed you how different a ride cymbal can be? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people, and I include myself in this, that I know I'm hearing the same records you are, but you're hearing a lot more nuance in ride cymbals than I would probably say most drummers. But what was the first one that you're like, oh, okay, there is something here?
I would say the 4 and More record. It's interesting with like early Miles records with Philly Joe and some of that stuff from the 50s. They're amazing, but the recording quality isn't always like super pleasing. Even some of the early Max Roach stuff, it's like they sound incredible, but sonically, it's not like, when we hear a record that's perfect to us and you just got to sit down and play. I felt that way with 4 and More because there's something about the way that's recorded, and it's just a perfect sounding ride, and you just feel like sitting with just a cymbal for like hours, just going diddling, diddling, diddling. It's just it's so amazing, and of course the way Tony plays it. It's interesting too with that because I think Scott Lycan, from Istanbul, the Cymbal Jedi, was telling me that it's like a heavier ride cymbal than you would think, because I would always try to find really light ride cymbals but it's one of those things where sometimes the way something is recorded, it's hard to know what the tone is when you perceive it on the other end versus what's actually happening right in front of you.
Yeah, totally. I remember I went to see Kevin Stevens play at like Sassafras like 15 years ago or something, and I was in the back of the room and I was like, dude, that ride cymbals like sounds insane. Like it sounded like that kind of vibe, like the 4 and More kind of vibe, like thin and hot and, sizzly. And and he's like, dude, check it out. And I went back and played it, and it sounded like a manhole cover. Like it was like a heavy, like 24-inch A, like from the 70s or something, maybe the 60s. But like, yeah, it's that classic thing of going, well, like, what does it sound like in the room, and what does it sound like in the audience perspective or under the microphones, as opposed to our ears playing it. And it's like, yeah, if you're playing a thin 30th anniversary of GOP or like a Sabian Artisan or a Carope or something, like to you, you're like, this is it. And then you go out front and it's just like no one can even hear it.
Or you record it and it's the same thing. It just doesn't come through the way you thought. It speaks to your point, Dave, about the Pisces too.
Yeah, in the opposite way. Yeah. I was playing with Anti-Mask in New York years ago, and Danziger and Juliana came to the show, and I was like, how did it sound? And I was using these really thin Sabian crashes at the time, like HH Extremes or Fierce crashes or something. And they were like, oh, dude, we couldn't hear your cymbals at all. They were just like, whoosh. Like they were like, yeah, I don't know, we couldn't hear them. And I was like, huh. Okay.
You're like, okay.
Good money spent. All right. So, well, I mean, talking about gear, this is a great thing to then kind of segue into tone and sonics, which is the focus of Dave's new course. And so, Dave, you've built your teachings around technique and body mechanics. And how did that focus evolve into your mind's ear?
So everything that I do is because I feel like there's a need for it, and also because people ask for it. So this is more the latter. I just have had people on my Instagram for years going, oh my God, your drums sound amazing. How are you tuning them? And obviously that's not something I can help people with in the comments section of an Instagram post. So I was like, all right, well, naively, I'm just going to do some quick and dirty, like 90-minute course about tuning. And then I start writing out all my ideas. And, it's like 100 pages, and it ends up being like 5 hours. So, because it's not just about tuning, right? It's about your conceptual approach. It's about your philosophical approach. It's about what you conceive of as a sound, what you conceive of as a good sound, as a bad sound, who your influences are, who you're stealing from, who you're copying, what you're doing with that once you've stolen it. Your aesthetics overall, like what your tonal approach is and what your conceptual idea of tone is in the first place. So that's the first section of the course. The second section of the course is tuning, actual tuning. And then the third section of the course is a gigantic gear anatomy section, because it's amazing how many drummers we know who don't know the difference between a lug and a tension rod. Let alone like, oh, is it cherry? Is it maple or die-cast hoops or triple flange hoops? And there's also so much marketing involved in drums, like grain orientation and what wood species it is and what matters, what I think doesn't matter, heads. And also I used my DW Maple kit, my 80s Gretsch kit, my 60s Ludwig kit. And then I thought it would be fun to get like a crappy $300 Zimgar kit and be like, hey, here's a shitty kit. You don't need nice drums if you know what you want and how to tune. So I used that as well. And then I did a bunch of snares, Ludwig 2-piece, Tama Bell Brass, 70s Black Beauty, my TrueCast, all kinds of stuff. So a Craviotto. So I tried to basically be like, like I tend to do, that all-encompassing kind of one-stop shop, like, oh, I always wondered about those. What's the deal? So the first course is getting out of your own way, is hand technique, foot technique, advanced phrasing, like vocabulary, and pocket. That's how that's broken up. So that's like quite a bit, just that.
Yeah.
And then staying out of your own way is musicians treating themselves like athletes. So getting out of pain, avoiding pain in the first place. So that is... the foundation of that is sports massage, which I can't tell you. Everyone needs that. No one gets it done, but that takes care of so many people's issues. But people,
I can attest to it myself. The therapist you sent me to fixed my arm.
Yep, there you go. Did you see Kara?
Yes.
Yeah, she's amazing. I was so worried because I made the course with Diana, my mentor, and I was so worried about finding someone after she passed away, but Neil and Adam hit me to Kara, and I ended up using her in the course, and she's so great. She's got some moves Diana didn't have even. I'm like the thumb in the armpit. I'm just like, whoa. So that course is sports massage, stretching and mobility. I did that section with Yenny Tarma, who used to be a bass player, but now she's super mega into that world. And then strength and conditioning with Zamia Cohen, my personal trainer. So it's about rebuilding you from the ground up, getting all the body work done so your body's sort of neutral, and then stretching so you have range of motion, and then strength training. A lot of people do that out of order, and then, or they go see a physical therapist or whatever, and then you're just adding scar tissue on the scar tissue that's already there. So anyway, so that's how that course is structured. And then this course, staying out of your own way is like pretty physical. Getting out of your own way is a combination of physical and mental and conceptual. Your mind's ear it's not really anything physical about it. It's mostly conceptual, and we're dealing with sound, which is so subjective. But it's amazing. I mean, I know you guys know a bunch of people, drummers, who are just like, oh, I don't know how to tune. Like, it's this mystery to them.
I mean,
Elias. He famously, sorry to take that away. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, because he owns it too. I don't own it.
Part of me thinks Elias is secretly just knows exactly what he's doing. I don't know. I just sit down and, it's all a big ruse.
No.
Yeah, because people are like, whoa, dude, that sounded incredible. And you're like, I don't know. I just showed. It's like when someone has like a really great hair day and they're like, I rolled out of bed like that. And you're like, no, you didn't. This is, this is Los Angeles. It's intelligentsia. There ain't no way.
But the clips you post on Instagram sound amazing. That Gretsch kit sounds incredible.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, your kit always, in my practice spot, I don't care about tuning because I have those like air traffic control things on, and I don't really, unless I'm going to record myself, it's just about the movement. But when I walk by your lockout, your kit always sounds amazing, which is very rare in TK, as I'm sure you know.
Oh my gosh, wow, what a sweet, well, thank you guys, because I of course feel typically that my stuff doesn't sound good and everybody else's does, but I will say, well,
do you really think that? You honestly think that? That blows me away.
Oh, I
don't
mean,
believe
makes me sad.
No, I
don't believe you.
No, I mean it. I really mean it. And I think, Dave, to a lot of what you're talking about, people not knowing the differences between these elements of the drum kit, the hoops and all these things. Like, I am one of those people. I think for me, I'm a fan. I love listening. Some musicians that we know, at a certain point, you don't listen to music anymore. You kind of like, I just want to hear pop. Like, I love listening to music. I'm more of a fan than I am a drummer. So even listening to records, like Akira Jimbo is a good example. If there's like, if I watch one of his long segment things that he has, or like the band he was in, Cassiopeia, and if I like the way something sounds, I will try to get that, but I don't know how to really get there, if that makes sense. I'll kind of get it to the spot where my ear likes it, without really knowing much about it.
Well, that's exactly it, is you're listening to someone and going, this is cool, I like the way this sounds, and then you're trying to copy it, and you're going for that aesthetic. I talk about all of this in the course. And so like the thing that's missing there is you not knowing what is actually technically, structurally, acoustically happening with the heads and with the shells and with the room. And it's like, but at the end of the day, you have a sound that you're going for, your mind's ear, in your mind's ear, right? I can't help myself. And you're tinkering around until you go, that's what I want. Yep. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? But if you have knowledge that will like help you get there faster, or maybe even like better than you thought you could, that's helpful. But like what you're doing, I think a lot of people may seem obvious to us, but I think a lot of people fail to do that. I mean, it's amazing how many people come into my studio and they hit whatever kit I've said and they go, oh my God, these drums sound amazing.
And
I'm like,
do.
But it's like, it's because I'm, whatever kit is in there, it's because I go, okay, well, what do I want this to sound like? What does it want to do? And there's a sense of, this all comes down to having a sense of direction. And I think a lot of people fail to have that. They might like know what they want, but a lot of people don't even know what they want sonically. Like Dennis Chambers is a great example, like one of the greatest drummers of all time, and his drum tone has always been horrible. And also, like, obviously he loves Billy Cobham, and Billy Cobham's toms sound terrible historically too. And so like there's part of the lineage there, but I really think they're just like, I'm just playing, like I don't really care. I'm just completely guessing, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like there's no sort of tonal direction there. And Vinny, like, you know, you have Vinny in the 80s where he's doing the recording custom thing with the pinstripes, and that's a very clear aesthetic. And then you have him in the 90s and 2000s on the Gretches with the Coated Emperors, and that's a completely different aesthetic, but both are instantly identifiable, not just because of his playing, but there's a very clear tonal orientation going on there, even though they're totally different. So there is no right or wrong or even good or bad necessarily, because that's really up to, you know, the person. I mean, I talk about, there's a couple tracks on some Nine Inch Nails records, which I'm always forgetting the names of these songs, which is so annoying. But there's a couple Nine Inch Nails songs, like I think it's off With Teeth maybe, where like the snare drum's like ringing like crazy in the intro. And you're just like, oh my God, this sounds so bad. And then like the fifth time you listen to it, you're like, this is fucking cool. You know? And so there's that idea of like listening to something where you're like, I fucking hate this. And then it becomes cool. There's a cool, unique thing. And also, if the snare wasn't ringing like crazy like that on its own, it wouldn't sound the way it does when the synths and the guitars kick in. It wouldn't remain full, right? It would be
Absolutely.
thin.
Yep.
Right?
That is so true.
Yeah, because you've done enough recording and playing to where you know, like, where the guy's like, oh, that snare drum's ringing, like, can you do something about it? And then you tape it up, and sometimes you need to do that, but then sometimes you're like, oh, this sounds dead now.
It just turns to nothing. I lived in Brooklyn around the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, when, like, it was post-Strokes. And so if you were, like, you know, there was always the 55-bar scene and kind of the jazz sounding music, but then if you were playing in any types of bands and stuff, that sound, which was a really muted down sound like what Fab got on his records, that was really popular. And so many drummers would do that, I think, in their own room, but then as soon as you'd bring that to a club, one of these clubs on the Lower East Side, like through a wall of guitars, there'd be nothing. My friend, he's now a good friend of mine, but he produced my band's first record when we lived in New York. He was Andy Wallace's assistant for years, and that was how he came up. And the first time I went in the studio with him, first of all, I was burying the beater. Apologies, Dave. I really try not to do that now, and
That's it. That's the show, guys.
But it was funny that it took like a sort of rock-oriented guy to tell me, but you'd think it would be the opposite, because obviously, like, I played jazz for a few years. I've never been a great jazz player, but I did it and try it, for school, etc. And it's like an 18-inch. It's a bebop kit. You kind of do it instinctively I feel like when a drum is tuned that high, But then as soon as I would started playing rock music, I really wasn't, and he really got on my case about it, and it was very, very difficult for me. And we were recording at Electric Lady, and he would bring me in, Dave, just like you do, what you post. he did that to me, except at Electric Lady through like a SSL console. He was like, let me play you the difference between what you were doing and what I had you just do. And then, you know, that was applying to the rest of the kit too, as far as how I was treating it at that moment, because that was just what was sort of people were asking for, I felt like. And that was what I brought in. And he was just like, dude, no.
And then the hard part is in that scenario, which happens to so many people, is like they've been burying the beat their whole life. And then the engineer's like, hey, can you stop doing that? It sounds bad. And they're like, no.
Yeah, it's
and then
hard.
they're like so distracted by trying to not bury the beater, they can't even play the music right anymore. And they're thinking too much. And I'll keep this short. But one of the things I talk about with people every day is the fact that all of our friends, all of the greatest drummers of all time, many of them bury the beater. But the thing is no one knows why they're doing it. They just do it. And many people convince themselves that they think, oh, I like the muted sound, or I like the shorter sound for this kind of music, but whatever. No. The reason why people bury the beater is to hold their bodies up in space. Because sitting down and picking your legs up in the air is one of the weirdest things you could do with the human body. You only do it when you're playing drums and church organ. I'm not aware of any other scenario in the world where you sit down and pick your feet up in the air. It's a very strange thing to do. And because of technology, we don't know how to organize ourselves expansively anymore. We're collapsed into ourselves. So you pick your leg up and you go, oh, and you're going to face plant into the rack tom. So what do? Bury your leg into the bass drum. That's why people do it. But people don't know that, right? Or the hi-hat if you're not burying it in the bass drum. So you're doing it not to fall over. It's not a sonic decision most of the time. It's an unconscious, like, survival mechanism, really. And then the very common thing on top of that people do is they not only bury it, but then they hold the beater against the head in between the notes when you're not even playing. If you're not even playing, if you're going, and you're going, like, that's going to make your pocket stiff. Are there people who do that who sound amazing? Tons. Is that wrong? No. Could they sound better if they stopped doing it? Yeah. So people misunderstand the work that I do all the time, and they think I'm going to be like, no, that's wrong. It's wrong. It's like, no, it's just like you're killing yourself and it doesn't sound very good, and we can make your life easier. And that's kind of the jam, you know, like people project a lot of things onto that because they don't really understand it, you know. And then the other thing is, if someone tells you to stop burying the beater, usually it's an old jazz guy wearing a suit in a fucking practice room. And then he tells you to play heel down instead, which is not the right tool for the job if you're playing anything but jazz in a restaurant. So that gets even more confusing because then you're basically trying to bunt a home run. And you're like, why isn't this working? So it's really hard. I just went over this with a good friend of ours the other day, and he was like, this is too hard. I give up. And I'm like, okay.
Sounds like a friend of mine.
He gave it like a few weeks, and he was like, and you know, I don't think he really even tried that much. And he was like, this is too hard. Like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, okay. That's your prerogative, you know, like you sound good now, but you're, you know, still relatively young. So let's see how you're doing in 5, 10 or 15 years, you know, you're going to be hobbling around.
How much would you say if there is a percentage of gear versus drummer when it comes to the sound you're creating?
It's a really good question. And, you know, it's that same cliche. It's like you could put Steve Jordan on a groove percussion CB700 kit and it would still sound like Steve Jordan. You could put someone who doesn't have a sound or isn't very good on Steve Jordan's drums, not going to sound good. And that was why I put that shitty Zimgar kit on the course. Because I was like, look, I have like a lot of the best gear people perv out over for years on here. You don't need that. You need to be able to play, and you need to have a sound in your head and be able to know how to achieve that, have the ability to go after that and achieve it. Now, if you play well and you know what sounds you want and you have good gear, game over, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. It's like you don't need good gear or specific gear, but if you know what you want and you can play really well, it sort of takes it over the top to the next level. But I would much rather hear someone who has a aesthetic direction playing on a piece of garbage. I feel like Lewis Cole played on like a really shitty kit forever, right?
Yeah.
I've been working with him on a bunch of stuff lately. He's so great. He's going to sound like whatever I mean, dude, he's like playing in a fucking porter potty in the clown corps or shit. It doesn't matter, you know? Like, he still sounds great. He still sounds like him. So I think it's really all about the person. And then, you know, it's kind of like the cream on the top if you can play a bell brass. I think also, to add one more thing, the reason why I have like 100 snare drums in the other room is because, well, do you need that many? Absolutely not. But when I pick one up off the rack and I put it down and I hit it and I go, oh yeah, like that makes me want to play. It's inspiring. That's why gear is great. I mean, when I was doing this course and I threw up my 80s Gretsch kit and my 60s Ludwig kit and I hit the toms, I was just like, oh my God. And it just makes you want to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's why gear is fun at the end of the day, really. That's why having good sounds and good tones is important and fun, because it's inspiring and it makes you want to make music, which is the whole point of all this.
Yes. What do you think, Sarab?
Yeah, I mean, one thing when Dave was talking, I think it's that same era that I lived in New York, I was always playing on house kits, and I shared a room with all these other people, and I was hearing you guys talk about it, like how much the gear can bring something out of you musically that you just didn't even know was there. And I feel like I felt that always for a long time. But when I lived in New York, because all of the gigs that I did were really beaten up kits, and most of the time you wouldn't have very much time, 10-minute changeover, classic rock club stuff, and heads are all pockmarked in, and you just gotta go, and you gotta like find your inspiration through the music, not the drums at all. Now fast forward to now, everything has changed so much starting with just with all the technology. We all play through in-ears so much of the time. Things are dialed in. Also the technology that exists now with VSTs and what people are able to do live, of course in the studio, but even live, what they're able to give you and simulate you. All this stuff really is so new, at least to me. Maybe some people were kind of working in that for a while, but I think for most people, the democratization of it is new. Like even small gigs have all this fancy stuff now. And then throw Instagram into it. It's really a place where, especially with recording setups now all the stuff that Dave's talking about like really matters in 2025, because so much of what people assess of you when they see you as a drummer, I think now, is just like the choices that you're making. Like what have you picked to play on, and Dave's totally right. Like it doesn't have to be that it's some high end thing, but what is it that you're doing to the drum to make your statement, or how are you playing on the kit? And that stuff, I think even for musical directors that are looking at people, I mean, I've never really had like in-depth conversations with them about it, but I have to imagine that even that matters. It's like, oh, well, this guy, he goes for a more piccolo style snare sound. Maybe that's not what we want. And that can be dangerous, because you could be like, no, but I have this big fat ballad snare and I can do the Nashville thing too. It's like, it's an interesting thing. I think that's why a lot of people are always changing their kits out and this and that to kind of show like, I can be this guy, I can be that guy. But I do think that, of course, like what you guys have been saying, it is always, it's the person that really brings that out of the kit. Like when I was in New York at that same time, I keep referencing that time for some reason. But there was a Bill Stewart story that somebody told me, and there was a jam session going on at Smalls, and it was however the kit was tuned and however it was, and it didn't sound the way we know that his drums sound, which are pretty signature, I'd say. But he sat down and everybody in the room freaked out because it just sounded like him. And I know he's got that thumb thing that, Gal knows how to do. Dave, I know he's done it for all of us, and just everything. And I wasn't there for it, of course, but I loved hearing the story. It gave me goosebumps. I thought, oh my gosh, like that's such an example of it being the player. But I think in this day and age, and especially for the world that we're in, which is like popular based music, the gear and all that stuff really matters. I sometimes try to get around it because I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. But it kind of really does.
I want to touch on something you said that was a really great point is, in this day and age, as a working professional musician, as a drummer specifically, you do. I mean, there are people who do one thing and that's what they do, and that's great. But a lot of people are like, hey, I can do this, or I can be this guy, or I can do this. And I think drummers, more than any other instrument, we have to be able to wear different hats. And that's why I used a bunch of different kits, new and old, and a bunch of different snare drums. And I did the splatty thing, and I did the cracking bell brass thing. And because, like, if I'm doing a drum clinic, I'm playing a DW kit that's like a rock kit. But, like, if I'm playing something else, like whatever I get called, I mean, whatever, like if I get called for some mellow, vibey singer-songwriter thing, like I know how to go and do that, and it doesn't sound like a rock guy trying to figure something out that's like not what he does. It's being able to wear all those different hats musically, and that's what we have to do as drummers.
And do it confidently, you know, because like you've talked about performance anxiety, mental struggles, and all that stuff. And in your expertise, how does that affect the way you're chasing tone? I think the most vulnerable I ever feel is when I've tuned my drums up and then everyone's on stage and like, all right, give me the rack tom. And I'm
dude.
Ding. And I just look to see if everyone's
God.
like, that's horrible. You know, like, oh, it sounds good today. I'm
Dude.
like, I thought it was okay. Anyways, yeah.
That's interesting.
I know that feeling so well.
That's interesting. See, I love this.
You love it because you never feel that way. That's
Well,
I'm always
why.
confident. And
No, that's not true. I mean, the last tour I did was with Weezer a few years ago, and I was playing Pat's giant Ludwig kit with 6 bass drums, and my buddy Eric Sanger ended up teching for me. But, you know, I'm parachuting into that, and they already have it all set up, and so I sit down in this kit, and there's moon gels all the way around the
I noticed
toms.
that.
Yeah, way more than I've ever used. Like, I swear, like literally like 20 moon gels per tom. And so I sit down and I go, whoa, okay, that's weird. But, you know, we've all done enough stuff to where, like, especially playing stadiums or whatever, you have had no idea what the hell it sounds like way out there.
Yeah.
So I sit down and I go, these actually sound pretty, like, resonant, and they're really high. It was really strange. Like, it did not sound at all what you thought it would. And then I put my ears in, and like I would hit the tom like acoustically, and it was like boom, boom, and then I'd put my ears in, and it would be like boom, boom. It was really weird.
Whoa.
For whatever reason, I don't know. And this is kind of the dark art of this stuff, is you're just like, well, you got all these variables spinning around in whatever kind of like gears in a watch, however they interact, especially outside in these bigger venues. But it was funny because I hit the tom and I was like, oh, no, that's not going to do. And then I tuned it down, and then I put my ears in, and it was like, it like sounded terrible. And I was like, Eric, I'm really sorry. Can you please come over here and fix this? I fucked it up. Like, just put it back the way it was. Because I'm like not familiar with it, and I don't want to, we got a sound check or whatever, you know. It's like, so I feel that what you were talking about, Ben, I feel that way when I've never met anybody and I have to play this show, you know, and they're sound checking, and it's just like, oh God, it's not. I guess I'm anxious for different reasons, so it's not it's not the same thing. But yeah, I have that conversation with. I taught a guy yesterday who's in a huge band from the '90s. And we spent 2 hours talking about anxiety that he's been struggling with and mental health stuff. And it's so interesting, man. I have never once thought about that tied to tone. I don't think anyone's ever brought that up to me. So I'm so glad you said that, because I've never thought about it. So when you're in that scenario and you're like, and they're like, okay, rack tom, like, are you afraid that the front of house guy is going to go, no, this sounds terrible, like, you got to fix that? And then you're like, oh God, like, everyone's going to think I'm a loser, or like, I don't know how to fix this, or like, I'm curious what's going through your head.
Well, yes, that, and also maybe in a separate thought is that then I go, less than 30 seconds ago, I thought that sounded good, and now I think it sounds like complete dog shit. Nothing's changed. Like, why? It's almost like some like little troll comes in and like adds like 10 overtones the second everyone looks at me.
The tuning troll.
Yeah, the tuning troll. And it's real. But yeah, I don't know. It's all those things. And then it makes me think like, I don't have good taste in music and all that stuff.
And you just kind of spiral out.
Yes.
Well, you know, I think it's really interesting because the drums present a very specific challenge in that when you have something that has two membranes on it, you cannot tune that to a pitch, a concert pitch. It is impossible. That's why a timpani is bowl-shaped and you have one membrane on it, because you can tune that to a pitch. The point I'm getting at here is, if you're playing guitar or bass or a piano, it's in tune or it's out of tune. That's it. And with drumming, you can't do that. So that's where people spin out, I think, because you go, well, there is no in tune or out of tune. Obviously, like if the drum's really out of tune, you can hear that. But there's a pretty wide margin where it's like, well, that sounds okay, but it's kind of doing this weird growly thing or this weird diving thing. And then sometimes people notice and sometimes they don't. And like, if that happens, like, are you able to fix it? I remember I was doing a session, it was like an M83 session with Justin Meldal Johnson at Sunset Sound like 10 years ago for some film score thing. And I brought in my Ludwig stainless steel kit at the time, the 70s kit, and my DW Jazz Series, like Gretsch kind of copy kit, two completely different kits.
Yeah.
And dude, I just could not get them to stop ringing. Like, I don't know if it's the B room, I can't remember which one it is, but it's like a long shoebox, like rectangular room. And it was everything was so refracted and glassy in there. Like, I ended up with some mishmash mix-up of two kits, and top heads are taped up and bottom heads are taped up. And it was just kind of like, dude, this room is a nightmare. Like, he's like, yeah, kind of, I don't know, it sounds, and I'm just like sweating bullets in there. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't happen that often, but I remember reading about in Modern Drummer and stuff, like, I think it was Kirky B, like, said, like, someone's like, what's the biggest thing, matters in your tone? He's like, the room. And I remember being like 13, he'd be like, that's boring. Like, I don't, I can't buy that, or being like, well, how am I supposed to, control that? Like, but it's true, especially recording. It's like the room you're in is huge. And that's also one of the variables I talk about in the course. But I don't experience that often, but it has happened in the past. And I think if you follow it down, the core of that is like, I'm going to get found out for not knowing what I'm doing. But I will say, with drums specifically, it's tricky. It's really, which is part of the reason why I made this course, because like, I know what I want. I have all this gear. I can tune, I can blah, blah, blah. I can do all this stuff. And even still, that still does happen to me sometimes in recording sessions. So, someone who doesn't have any of that knowledge, like, yeah, I mean, that sounds like a nightmare.
I guess it goes back to that I don't have a specific time where I've sat down at a kit and I've been like, this is exactly the sound that I want. Few drummers probably have gotten to the point where their toms are exactly, you know what I mean? Like, how many people have actually played a nicely tuned kit? Most people tune it themselves. They're around themselves, it's...
And also, really good point. And, when Dave, I don't know if Dave said Sound City or Sunset Sound. I always get them confused. But up at Sound City, in Tony Berg's room, who's an amazing producer for those who don't know, when you go into his place to record, it's one of those situations where you don't change anything on the kit unless he tells you from the booth, I think we should try a different snare drum. And actually, he has the one headlight piccolo in there, which I used on Katie's record, Katie from Muna. And,
that's awesome.
And it's amazing. But it was like his, he's calling the shots. That wasn't the thing that was up when I was in there. Also, I tried to like immediately play a big rim shot on, and he was like, what are you doing? He was like, no, you don't ever need to hit a drum like that. And with a smile, but also like, the answer to that is, yeah, you do sometimes, dude, but in Tony's world, you don't.
You just summed up the whole course right there. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because like, you have a Noble and Cooley 3 7/8 by 14 solid maple piccolo with die-cast tubes. You crank that fucker up, you do a rim shot, dude, that is like one of the greatest sounds.
It feels amazing.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. In that context, in that scenario with that producer in that room, you don't do rim shots because that's not what he wants. But in a different context, you do rim shots, and it's about going, this is the right move in this scenario, and being able to process all of that, like, that's it.
I'll be honest, snare, I can kind of always get it to where I needed to get, but it's the toms, especially a 12 or a 13, it's chaos. It's my biggest insecurity as a drummer is my ability to tune a rack tom.
13s are tricky for some reason because I've got 10, 12, 13 on both my Gretsch kits, and I just don't even. I use a 13 like a left floor tom, I guess now, and that's just like I barely hit it when I do. It's like.
It's really hard for me to get behind a 14-inch floor tom.
Yeah, that's off.
I like 14.
You can use
you
14s
do.
for racks, but
I
not
do use
floors.
14. Oops.
I'm with Dave on this one.
Okay.
15s.
Well.
I can do a 15 floor.
It makes sense. I think Gal is the same way, but I'd use a 14 if I had a 16 next to it.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So then
what
it's
are you
like-
just gonna do a 14? What are you, an animal?
I don't know. Well, Dave would know more about this. And again, this is showing how like little I actually know, because I'm not just like being like, I don't know anything. Like I actually don't. I didn't know what the wood was. I play Brooklyn's, and I didn't know for a long time what I was like. Someone was like, yeah, isn't it just like, I was going to say sandalwood. It's not sandalwood. Obviously, I know it's not sandalwood. I just
get a
looked at there's
Gretsch
something
email right
sandalwood
now.
on my desk.
We
You're
regret to
out.
inform you.
Well, this is one of the things I talk about in the course, where it's like materials versus construction in the sort of gear part of the course, because we live in a capitalist society, and you have to make new products and sell them every year. And in the drum
Yeah.
industry, what's the easiest way to do that? You change the wood species, right? So I've talked to a bunch of different manufacturers. I design products and do all sorts of stuff. And I was talking to someone at a large company where they did a ton of research for a long time. And they were saying, yeah, we determined that the drum head choice amounts to about 60% of your sound.
Wow.
Yeah, that was what they came to. So I have a whole thing in the course where I'm like, hey, look, like you can use whatever you want, but I really think like Remo's the best. Everyone makes good cymbals. Everyone makes good drums. I like Vic Firth. There's a couple other companies that are doing better now, but like with heads, I really don't think there's any other option. Now, obviously, if someone wants to play Aquarian or Evans or Attack or whatever, like do whatever you want, you can make it work. But for me, because I'm making this video because people are constantly asking about my sound, Remo is a huge part of that sound for me. So head choice is huge. You can have the greatest drum kit of all time and you put an ebony pinstripe on it, it's not going to sound good. Right? It's going to sound like a basketball, right? Or if you just put the wrong head on it, like if you're going for a disco thing and you put like a Kevlar head on the snare or whatever, like that's obviously not going to work either, right? So if you put like a maple tom next to like a birch tom and they're made by the same company and everything else is the same, you're going to be hard pressed to tell the difference. You're not going to be like, oh my God, that is like way different, right? Because construction matters far more acoustically than the materials. So for instance, if I'm playing a maple ply snare drum and then I'm playing a maple stave shell snare drum, they're going to sound completely different because the construction is completely different, right? So if I'm playing like a maple solid shell versus like a maple ply, they're going to sound pretty different. But it's such a fun wormhole to go down. And at the end of the day, you put something up and you're like, man, this makes me want to play. That's the whole point. Like when I first started getting into Keplingers a long time. Do you have one, Ben?
I don't.
Okay.
And I'm from Seattle too. I mean, I know Greg, but I don't have one, unfortunately.
I love him. He's out of his mind. He's the greatest. Heavy metal drums, like literally heavy metal rolled and welded shells. So you're like, oh, this drum's like 15 pounds. I'm going to put a die-cast hoop on it and like a control sound and beat the shit out of it. And it sounds horrible because those drums are supposed to have triple flanged hoops and a coated emperor. And like, that's how they're made. And like, you don't touch it. You just leave it like that. And the crappy, snappy, generic snares. And that's the Matt Chamberlain thing. That's how you set them up and that's how you leave them. And, like when I first got it, I was like, I'm going to do this whole, and it didn't work at all. So, but those are cool, and you're not used to playing those and they're like, all these crazy weird overtones and you got to learn how to control them. You got to like kind of lasso them. They're amazing, man. I mean, Chamberlain and I talk about them all the time because they're just so funky and weird.
Well, you could even say that people buying your course will ultimately save them money because if they keep chasing Nothing against Keplingers, but spending $1,200 hoping that that's going to get them that sound they want, but they still have no idea what the hell they're doing. They could have just bought your course for a few times, and then made any drum sound good.
Dude, totally. I mean, and it's the same thing for the other courses too. It's the whole reason why I make this stuff is because I don't see this information readily available, and it ultimately saves you time and money and heartache and blood, sweat, and tears, because you're not wasting your time banging your head up against the wall or going down a path that ultimately isn't fruitful. So, yeah, I mean, I've done that plenty of times, man, where I'll be like, oh man, I wanted this drum forever. And then I got it. And I was like, oh my God, this thing sounds terrible. And you don't know until sometimes you can't know, but there's sometimes where you're like, if you have that knowledge, you're like, like for instance, concrete example. If you make like a heavy, like cast metal drum, like my DW TrueCast, if you make something thicker than like 5 or 6 millimeters, it's just going to sound bad. It's just going to be choked. It's just going to go kick. It's like going to be like you're hitting this tabletop, because it's a point of diminishing returns. The thicker a shell gets, the more attack you have and the higher the pitch. But you reach a certain point and it just starts sounding bad. So there are people out there making these boat anchors where you're making like super thick 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch cast bronze drums that literally weigh like probably 50 or 60 pounds. And they just sound awful.
Yeah, it's okay if you have a million drums like Dave, as long as you can tune them all. It's the people that just have a wall of snares and you're like, I can't make any of these sound good. But they look nice.
But to the point of your course, though, Dave, you don't need a lot of gear if you know what you're doing.
Dude, you can have a vintage Ludwig kit or a vintage Gretsch kit for like a beat up kit for $1,000 on Craigslist.
Yeah.
An acrylite, superphonic, like a Pioneer or like some sort of Black Beauty type thing, solid shell, 4 or 5 snares, you're good.
Yeah.
You don't have to have that, but like if you really wanted to cover all your bases, I mean, really, you could just get a superphonic and kind of
call
be
it
done. I threw up my acrylite in the course, and I was just like, oh my God, this thing is like, every time it has like 2 pieces of tape on it, and it's just tuned down. It's just like, poof, and every time I throw it, I'm like, God damn, dude, this thing sounds so good. This is so stupid. They're just great drums.
For people that want to get the course, because I believe your course came out the 8th of September. This is probably going to come out a few days after that. But where can people actually get the course? Then also, is it going to be one of those, like a living course like the other ones? You're going to be continuing to update it, or?
Good question.
All that jazz.
So you can get Your Mind's Ear at the same place you can get my other courses, Getting On Your Own Way and Staying On Your Own Way, at daveelitch.com. And you just go to my website, click instructional courses, drop down menu, and just click on it, and it's right there. And I'm going to have like a trailer posted on my Instagram. So you can also just go to my Instagram, and there's going to be a link in my bio that'll take you right there as well. This is not going to be a living, breathing course, I don't think, because I don't know what else I would add.
You sent us the contents. There's a lot of stuff in there. I don't know what I would add either. And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using iZotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.